Ladies and gentlemen of Congress, my name is Rod Klass. I hold position as a private attorney general. You as legislators gave the people that right. We do hold position as being able to come into Congress and into a court and to address legal issues of judicial corruption and corruption of public officials. That's what you created the private attorney general for. I'm here today because we came before the Judiciary Committee back in 2007 with a footwork of paperwork of exposing corruption of federal judges and state judges in violation of the Highway Safety Act and federal funding programs. This is where the problem lies, but we're also in here to address the fact of the bankruptcy of 1933, which is a very, very important problem of what we're dealing with the courts and with public offices. I host an internet radio show called AIB Radio. I have a research team behind me from all across the United States, so this isn't me coming in and making this statement. I have got verification because we're dealing with congressional records. We're dealing with congressional documents. We're using codes and statutes that was created by you people sitting up here and the members of Congress. You're the ones that created this stuff. We didn't. The problem that we're having is corruption within the court systems. We have absolutely no justice. The courts, when we walk in as pro se litigants, and I'm going to tell you right now, the State Justice Institute that you people created under Title 42, Chapter 115 is the major problem we have in this country. The State Justice Institute is supposed to be a board of judges that's supposed to be regulating the court system. And what they're doing is they're going out and holding judges conference 4 times a year. They're telling the judges how to railroad the pro se litigants in these courtrooms. They're sitting down telling us how to disregard our paperwork. If we don't hire an attorney, then we are to be disregarded. I'm going to remind you, you created the private attorney general setup. You created the people that could come into a courtroom and fight the system legally. You did not create the Bar Association. There's no legislative act that created the Bar Association. It is a private organization created by the Supreme Courts of each state. And these lawyers that's walking in are in violation, have committed perjury on their oath that they would not mislead, misrepresent, misconstrue, bring false statements before the court. And every one of these lawyers have committed perjury and they have lied. We're told to hire these people. These people took an oath to the Constitution that they would uphold the law and defend it. I'm here to tell you right now, they're not doing it. I'm also here to tell you right now, under your own regulations that you people created, these lawyers and judges are operating in violation of the Taft-Hartley Act. They're running a closed union shop. I myself have been a victim of traffic violations. I want to explain to you about there's 2 types of driver's licenses, a CDL, commercial driver's license, and a commercial motor vehicle. Both of these, under your regulations under Title 49 USC Code, Title 49 CFR, and under the Governor's Highway Safety Act program under Title 23 USC Code and under Title 23 CFR Section 1250, the political subdivision is supposed to get 40% of the federal funding coming off these traffic tickets, and they're not getting it. It's being embezzled by the state, being embezzled by the state attorney's office. This is an issue. This is why we came before John Conyers. This is why we came before Patrick Leahy in 2007. That's what this paperwork was all about, was judicial corruption on the federal side as well as on the state side because of federal funding abuse. We are here today to address these issues again before you. I personally brought a case into North Carolina addressing the driver's license issue. I went to an administrative court, not the local county court, an administrative court under the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946 of what you people created as a remedy for people like us to be able to come in and address this issue without going to a standard court. I had an administrative court judge sit back and tell me, with the Attorney General for North Carolina, that the Department of Transportation, with the tag agency, and the police department They do not work for the administration. They do not work for the state. They're private contractors. I beg to differ with that, Judge, because I put in the statutes that shows that they have to come under the state. They are part of the administration. They do work for the governor's office. The judge ruled they're private contractors. I was told to take it to a judicial review. I did. The second judicial review, the Attorney General again popped up into this thing. He addressed the judge, says, Your Honor, Mr. Class brought charge against DOT, the tag agency, and the police department. They're not part of the state administration. They are private contractors. And I says, I object. The judge sat down and says, well, Mr. Class, they're private contractors. I says, fine, but you and I talk private contract law. Whatever you are giving them federal funding under the Highway Safety Act, under Section 23-1250, and under the Governor's Highway Safety Act under 23 U.S.C. Code 402, the governor signed into effect federal funding for every single ticket. That's not court costs, that's not fines. That is federal funding program under the Highway Safety Act. It is a proven fact that these political subdivisions are not getting their fair share. Why? Because it's gone into the CAFR account. It's going to a private account sitting in the capital of each one of these states. It is embezzlement of taxpayers' money. This is the issue. My issue of it is, if they're not getting the federal funding, then you can't sit here and charge me. This is what the issue was before the court, and this is why the Attorney General come back in and says, well, they're private contractors. That's why the judge is arguing this. I said, then he trying to tell me there was local government, and we brought in the definition of local government. Local government deals with hospitals, it deals with water and sewage. Local government did not have DOT, it did not have the tag agency, it did not have the police department, but it had the county sheriff in this for the county. I said, so we caught them in another line. I said, this is where the issue is. The driver's license with a CDL and a CMV, the American people out here do not qualify. I'm not saying we don't have to have a driver's license. I'm saying we don't meet the qualifications. The qualification says I have to be paid. I'm not being paid. Now, the other issue on this, that dealing with the statutory side, these are your regulations, but I'm going to bring up the bankruptcy side in this. And that bankruptcy of 1933, ladies and gentlemen, is the most important thing of all that's dealing with every one of these court cases. Because in 1933, under Public Law 148 Stat, better known as H.R. 1491, you people in Congress created the state of emergency clause. Under that state of emergency, you took the gold and silver off of every American person in here. You put us down to where all of our property had to be regulated and signed over to the state. I'm going to sit here and give you a prime example of this. How many of you people in Congress up here knows what an MSO is as you created it? You're the one that turned it into law. This is part of your paperwork. Manufacturer Statement of Origin. That is the ownership of every single vehicle, whether it's an automobile, whether it's a truck, whether it's a trailer. That manufacturer statement is the ownership. And the moment we register it to the state, register it to the state means you hand it over. What's it mean when I register something to you, sir? It means I'm registering it to you. It means you own it. Every one of these vehicles out here is registered to the state. And if they're registered to the state, then who has to make the car payment on it? Who has to pay the insurance on it? Who has to put the gas in it? Who has to do the maintenance up on it? You're the owner. It's registered to you. All I do is hold title that shows that I can drive it. It's in my care, but you're the owner. I said, I went down and talked to the sheriff department on this. I had a nice conversation with the Gaston County Sheriff. I brought this issue up to him because he was a lawyer. He knows what an MSO is. I used the Sheriff County police cruisers as an example. I said, now, who owns these sheriff cruisers? He says, the county. I said, county owns it. He says, yes, they do. I said, but you as law enforcement put the money out of your own pocket and put it into the gas tank, right? You fill it up? Well, no, the county fills it up. But you guys pay for your own insurance. He says, no, the county pays the insurance. I said, but you guys do your own maintenance, right? He says, no, the county does the maintenance. I says, wait a minute, are you telling me that the county pays the insurance? The county made the car payment. The county puts all the gas and maintenance on this thing. I says, now, did you and I have an understanding? We just had talked about the state owning every vehicle out here. He says, yes, they do. I says, then if the state owns it, who's supposed to pay the car payment on it? He says, the state. Who puts the insurance on it? He says, the state. I said, who does the maintenance? He says, the state. I said, now let me ask you one question. He says, what's that? He says, I asked him, I says, you get paid, right? He says, of course we get paid. I said, that's funny. I haven't got paid by the state yet. We have a labor management dispute. I said, this is where the problem's coming in. Now, if the state owns it, then the state's required. This just falls under the bankruptcy. And if the state owns it, this comes under that Highway Safety Act. My political subdivision is not getting its 40% of the Highway Safety Act. That was the issue. And this is why the administrative court, which is supposed to deal with administrative violations, which is what people like me are supposed to be able to come in and address it. I says, under your own Attorney General's manual of 1947, you people created the Rule 4. And what is Rule 4? Rule 4 says if there is a conflict in public policy, you're supposed to come to John Q. Public, that's me. We're supposed to address the public policy conflict. We're in here to address it. And they're bypassing by saying nobody's a public official. Nobody can be held accountable. I said, I did another case. I got a young man sitting in jail. He has not had a trial yet. He's been in jail for over 2.5 years and never had a trial. I brought charges, again through the administrative court, against the police department, against the prosecutor's office, against the attorney general's office, against the sheriff department, against the sheriff jail setup for the county jails. I got a ruling back from the administrative court. They have no subject matter because they're not part of the administration. I said, so DOT's not part of the administration, tag agencies, the police department, the sheriff department, the governor's office isn't part of the administration? I said, who's running the country? Now, this is what the PAG is for, is to address this. That's why we're here before Congress today. We want accountability on our side of the fence for the people. Now, I'm also here to address to you something very simple here about the foreclosures in every one of these homes. This is, we're dealing with massive numbers of foreclosures across this country. Through congressional records of 1917, Charles Lindbergh went back and stated that the people, us, audience, we are the creditors of this country. We hold the credit because in 1860, you guys created what was known as the greenbacks. The greenback was something similar to the Federal Reserve. It was no money. You took the gold off of the people and went right back into the banking system back at that time. These are in your congressional record. The people are the credit line. We are the credit of the nations. It is our ability to work is what keeps this country running. What proves that? McFadden in 1932 and his congressional records sit here and says that the money is backed 100% by the labor of the credit of the people of this nation. And that the Federal Reserve note has no value, not so much as a penny's worth. And that Federal Reserve note is not supposed to come out to the American people. It is supposed to be internal currency. That's exactly what it sits here and says. And I can back that up. All we have to do is get into the 1913 Federal Reserve Act, get into Section 16. It sits there and tells you that that Federal Reserve note is for the internal currency. It is to deal with the federal, it deals with your Federal Reserve agents. It deals with your Federal Reserve banks. It is strictly internal. That is the only obligation to it, and it becomes the obligation of the United States. They tell you that you are to be able to turn this into the Treasury and be able to get lawful money. We can't turn nothing in because they aren't accepting anything. Now, if you get back into your banking regulations and you get into Title 12 under Section 411, 411 in your footnotes sits here and refers you back to what? Federal Reserve Act 1913, Section 16. There's no money. It's a credit line. Now, I'm going to take you into Title 12, 95, 95A, 95B. What's 95A and B? State of emergency. This takes you back in under Title 50 of the United States Code. What's Title 50? You guys wrote it. You should know what it is. It's War and National Defense. You're aware of the appendix side of this. Section 5. Section 5 is what? Trading with the Enemy Act. That brings us back into that HR 1491. That brings us back into Public Law 148 Stat. You declared us as Americans to be trading with the enemy. You made us enemies of the state. This is where the problem's coming in at. This is what the courts are abusing. And I'm going to tell you why. Because under their own rules and regulations, under Civil Rules Procedure, Rule 2 tells you what. You guys ought to know what it is. You're the one that wrote it. You're lawyers. You ought to be familiar with it. Rule 2 says there's only one course of action, civil. That's it. How are we being charged criminally? You ask any lawyer, ask any one of your prosecutors, and I'm going to ask you gentlemen right here. I want you to show me where the jurisdiction allows the courts to come in under civil and come under criminal as well. You only got civil. Where's your criminal side of this thing? And you won't be able to tell me, well, it's Title 18. Excuse me, Title 18? Don't you guys remember back in 1925, you guys had a debate? House passed it, Senate rejected it. Title 18 isn't legitimate. Don't you go back and read your own congressional records? I got them here. You want to see them? I got them with me. All I got to do is pop them out. Title 18's never been passed by the Senate. It was rejected 3 times. Let me tell you where your criminal charges are coming from. I want you to read Title 50. I want you to read Chapter 3, Alien Residence. Section 23, the jurisdiction of the court and judges shall be criminal. You're bringing us in under criminal charges under the Trading with the Enemy Act. How are we being treated as trading with the enemy when we bring this up in the courts? The court says, we're not going to go there. We have subject matter. Where's your subject matter? You guys will never explain the subject matter. You will never admit to the Trading with the Enemy Act side of this thing. This is where the issues are coming in. The courts are in violation of the state of emergency clause. And every one of these foreclosures and every one of these court cases that we're dealing with, McFadden got into 1932. He explained that that Federal Reserve note is a mere promise to pay. A mere promise to pay. It wasn't pay. It was a promise. Someday we'll give you money. As he goes down and explains, he sits here and gets in and talks about a bootlegger selling booze out of Germany, selling it to an American over here. The moment they signed the bill, that bill went before the Federal Reserve Bank in New York City. That signature got securitized. That signature was the collateral. It was not the bootleg, because it sits here and says, even if the bootleg got lost at sea, even if the Coast Guard confiscated it back at that time period because we was going through prohibition, it didn't matter. They would merely write it off. It is the signature that is collateral. Now, how can I come back and prove this? That this isn't just something that McFadden sat here and said? Very simple. Let you and I get into the mortgages. I've got a forensic auditor. I got several of them that I'm working with. The one gentleman didn't believe what we were sitting here saying. He had a $500,000 home. He went back and checked into the Security Exchange Commission. They found out they sold his signature. A $500,000 home made $93 million off of his signature. And they wanted to foreclose on his home because he failed to pay. They made $93 million off that signature. The understanding of it is, you go back and what McFadden said here and said, your signature is the collateral, not the bootleg, not the property. It doesn't matter whether that gets lost. They made money off your signature. That's what it's all about. So now we got a very serious problem here. Why? Because that $93 million, not one penny of it went in to pay the public debt for this country. You're not forcing the issue here. They're securitizing off of your name. You're allowing it. You're not allowing us to come in here to address this. Why? Because we got to play with your attorneys at the door in your office, and we can't get past them. That's why we're here now before you, because we couldn't get past your office help. Your attorneys is where the problem lies. And I'm supposed a lot of you guys are attorneys sitting up here, and you already know this. Now, the other problem of it is, what we're getting into, is the fact that we can go back and prove the bankruptcy. We're going back into every one of these courts. We have documented proof. This gentleman that I'm working with down here in Charlotte, the court, because he's never had a court hearing, we have documented proof that they made $6 million per quarter off this kid's case. He had 6 charges. You got 4 quarters in a year. Do the math. 6 times 6 times 4 comes out to $96 million. This kid's been sitting in jail for 2.5 years. Now take that, twice that, and we have absolute proof that they turn around and the court system securitized this kid's money, and they made over $1.6 billion off this kid, and he hasn't had a trial yet. You wonder why we got corruption in the court? It's highly profitable. You guys sit here and brought Martha Stewart in here for inside trading. What do you call what the court system's doing? It's inside trading within the courts. This is where the problem's at. That's why they don't want pro se litigants coming in. That's why they don't want people like me coming in. That's why we're before you, because we need justice. We need you to sit down and do your job and allow us to come in and bring charges against these judges, bring them up on impeachment charges. Sit down. But ladies and gentlemen, that's why we're here before Congress, because we cannot get justice in these courtrooms because they're securitizing off of our name. This is where the issue lies. That bankruptcy of 1933 is the most important issue until you go back in and start forcing these courts to come back under the rules and regulations on this, under the bankruptcy. Because, sir, ma'am, I'm going to tell you right now, under bankruptcy, state of emergency, that puts us under military law. We are under military law. Under military law, I'm going to remind you of the Lieber Code of 1861, Journal Order 100. Because we are being treated as enemies of the state, and you are abusing us as enemies of the state. There are rules of engagement. Your police officers and your judges are in violation of that rules of engagement. Your lawyers are in violation of that rules of engagement. Ignorance of the law is no excuse on their side. But I'm also going to address this point with you. We have recently discovered what is known as the Uniform Foreign Money Claims Act of 1989. And we also discovered the Uniform Foreign Currency Money Judgment Recognition Act of 2005. These courts are claiming jurisdiction on the American people of foreign money. What is that foreign money? I'm going to remind you of the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. You people in Congress, maybe not you personally, but you people up here in Congress in 1913 relinquished the right of this country creating its own currency. You went to the Federal Reserve, which is not even a government or part of this country. It is a foreign banking system. That now makes our Federal Reserve note foreign money. You have allowed these state courts as well as the federal courts to come in and come after the people under foreign currency, and you're not telling us this. You've never sit down and disclosed that you're coming after foreign currency. Now I'm going to remind you that foreign currency falls under international law. Under international law, I'm also going to remind you people of this. Of 49 Stat 3097, Treaty Series 881, Conventions and Duties and Rights of the State in 1933 in December, that you people created. You put this country under international law. You stripped the states of all its state laws. I'm going to remind you of the International Organization Immunities Act of 1945. You put this country under UN jurisdiction in 1945, but UN didn't come into 1946. How did you put it in a year ahead of time? You put us under international law a year ahead of time before UN ever come about. I'm also going to sit down and remind you, you guys also created Title 22 CFR, Foreign Relations, your oath of office. Every one of your oath of office comes under Foreign Relations. Title 8, United States Code 1481. You relinquish your national citizenship. I was in the military. When I sit here and took my oath to the military, I was required to take one step forward. That step forward walked me out of my citizenship. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't understand it. I do understand it now. I'm also going to sit down and remind you that that International Organization Immunities Act of 1945 is still in full force and effect. Hillary, whenever Arizona brought charges against illegal aliens, Hillary brought charges in the UN against Arizona under the International Organization Immunities Act because these public offices are foreign nationals. You're foreign to the American people. I'm going to give you a brief history here. I'm going to remind you that in 1871, the District of Columbia, which is what we're sitting at right now, used to be the United States under Washington and Georgetown. You created the District of Columbia out of this. The moment you created the District of Columbia, you made a foreign territory. You made a federal division here. You lifted it up off the land. And the proof of that is sitting in 77 American Jurisprudence 2D, Section 1, that sits here and says the United States is from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South. And whenever you turn around and you created the Act of 1871, you separated and you created the District of Columbia, which is a new seat of government, and you pulled it out of the United States. In 1925, you people incorporated the United States as a business. The proof of that is under Title 28, Chapter 176, under 3002. The United States government is a corporation with all instruments thereof. We don't have a government. We got a CEO sitting up here. These are all in your records. This isn't Rod Class bringing this in. These are in your records. My research team behind me have pulled up congressional records from across this country. This isn't one man doing this. This is a nation doing this. I'm just a spokesman for it. Why? Because I can put it together, and that's what I've done. I'm the one who's bringing it in before you. This is why we have corruption within the courts, because we're not dealing with the court. We're not dealing with the government. When I can get rulings that we don't have public officials, they're all private contractors, we did not hire private contractors. If we're private contractors, then we have no obligations to you whatsoever. None. This is where the problem lies. Do you work for us or don't you? Did we put you in office or did we not put you in office? The question now comes in is, how do we fix the problem? How do we address this problem? How do we get to 40% to the federal funding back to the political subdivision, which is what they're entitled to since 1966? You're talking trillions of dollars that's been embezzled. You're sitting here talking since 1933, roughly from that time period, you took the people's money. You forced the people into slavery. You sit here and stripped the people. Under the Alien Registration Act of 1940, that's where the birth certificate come in. That's where we had to register ourselves to the state. That's where the Social Security number come in. I want to tell you right now, you go back and look at your birth certificates and you'll find out that the state is a third party in this. Why? Because your mother turned us over to the state at birth. It has your father's name, it's got your mother's maiden name as given childbirth, and it was your mother's married name that turned the child over to the state. Now, why is there a distinct difference between the maiden name and the married name? Why do we have two different names on here? One giving birth and the other one giving the child over to the state. This is where the problem's coming in. The state's claiming ownership over the name. And when the people in the court are addressing this, The courts are sitting here laughing and making a joke out of it. Oh, you're one of them whack out weirdos, but yet here's the law that sits here and says this is exactly what you did. And when we're walking into the courts are telling us you can't bring the law into this court. You can't address the law into this court. What did you bring charges on me on? You brought some statutory law against me that I can't use it to defend myself with? How are we supposed to sit here and defend? The issue comes back into this court. The judges are telling us we can't hear the law. So now what you're telling me is under the 11th Amendment of the Constitution, the court has no judicial power to hearing any case in law and equity or commence prosecution against a United States citizen or citizen of the same state or citizen of a foreign state. So now the judges on the pro se side runs 11th Amendment on our side. On the prosecution side, they run Article 3, Section 2. The judicial power shall extend to all these cases under the Constitution and the laws of the land and under admiralty and maritime and ambassadors and controversies. You're allowing the prosecution to bring it in, but the courts are throwing us under 11th Amendment. Or are you throwing us under the fact of the state of emergency where all laws are suspended? Now I'm going to sit here and remind you people of something. Under rules of engagement, under that Lieber Code, there is a means that you have to operate under military law. Under UCMJ Title 10, 333, sits here and says, you cannot interfere with federal and state statutes or constitutional protected rights. These are your regulations. Everybody makes the issue that that flag in that courtroom is an admiralty flag. No, sir, that flag is not an admiralty flag. That is a presidential flag under Dwight D. Eisenhower under his executive order. He created that flag. It also comes under Army Regulations 840-10 under 8.1, 8.2. That eagle is a presidential flag. Those fringes is an administrative flag. These courts are operating under administration. And that American flag that sits over for the state has the spike on it. That's the district for the federal district for the military. That shows that these courts are operating under military jurisdiction. And the other issue of it is, who is bringing claims against the American people? You and I aren't, American people ain't bringing each other in. It is always the state of bringing us in. It's always the United States bringing charges in the federal court. So I'm going to tell you right now, the United States can't bring charges. The United States doesn't exist. Why? Because the United States sits in the 10 square miles of this District of Columbia. And the proof of that, go look at your border rocks that has been laid out around here, at least a plot out of your 10 square miles. It says United States on the inside, it says Virginia on the outside, it says Maryland on the outside. This is the United States within the 10 square miles. There's never a harm done here. The problem we're running into, you're bringing in the wrong plaintiffs into these courtrooms. It's always the state of. You're not bringing in a real victim. And how you're doing it, you're bringing it back in under Title 50. You're bringing it back in under Chapter 3, Section 23, jurisdiction of the court. You're bringing it in under the Trading with the Enemy Act. And that's how you're charging the American people in this country. We have a very serious issue, ladies and gentlemen. And the issue is, how do we address it? I'm sitting here telling you what they're doing wrong. What are you going to do about it as Congress? You have the duty, because the people appointed you. You are under the bankruptcy. This is what Traffica sat here and said. Congress is the fiduciary trustees. You guys are trustees over this. You are the guardians over this. Or is it the fact that we have a problem here, and the reason why you guys aren't doing anything is because you really don't exist either since 1860. Because in 1860, the South and the North split. You went side-eye. 1867, you guys created the Reconstruction Act on the North side, and you forced the South into submission by under the Reconstruction Act, because now you forced them to take on the 14th Amendment Section 4 citizenship. The American people aren't the 14th Amendment citizens. All those who hold public offices are. Is this why Congress isn't getting involved? Because Congress is suspended? Is this why Obama and the other presidents are claiming dictatorship over this country? This is why you have people like me coming in here as a private attorney general, representing the people of this country. This is why we are fighting the court system. This is why we are exposing what we're exposing and how we are exposing. Your laws and rules and regulations were created for these people, the judges, the lawyers, to follow. You created them. They can't come back and say, oh, well, you misinterpreted them. I'm going to give you a prime example of this. We got thousands and thousands of people going to jail on a firearm charge. And what's a firearm? Your first response is going to be anything that shoots out a bullet. That's a firearm. And I'm going to tell you you're wrong. Because under Title 27 CFR 479.11, a firearm, by legal definition that you people created, is a modified shotgun of a barrel of 18 inches or less, overall length less than 26 inches. A modified rifle of 18 inches less, overall length less than 26 inches. A fully automatic machine gun and a silencer. Would you like to explain to me how a revolver is considered a firearm when your legal definition sits here and says it had to be a modified shotgun or a rifle or a fully automatic machine gun or a silencer? And lawyers won't bring this up? Didn't they commit perjury? Because they swore that they would tell the truth. They would sit here and defend and uphold the law, and they're not doing it. This is just one example. I have been involved in foreclosures. I have got transcripts of a lawyer being threatened 3 times by a judge on a foreclosure issue. If he brought in the truth, he would be disbarred. Why can't we bring the truth into these courtrooms? Why are the judges sitting here disbarring lawyers? This is why we're down to the place we don't trust lawyers, we don't believe in lawyers, because the lawyer's first obligation is under Corpus Juris Secundum, Volume 7, Section 4. First obligation is to the court. Second obligation is to the public, and he has no obligation to his client, none whatsoever. So why are we being forced to hire somebody who has no obligation to us? Now, we didn't write these rules. You people did. These are your books. And you're going to tell me that they're wrong? Then why did you write them? The people have a legitimate gripe. We have people out here with driver's licenses who are doing DOT. DOT give you a separation. They run DOT tags. The police officers don't know their job. They don't know what a DOT sticker is. I've got a lady down here in Florida that's looking at going to jail for a year because the police don't know what DOT stickers are. Law enforcement is supposed to be a profession. These people are supposed to know the law. The very people that we put in office, between the lawyers, the judges, and the law enforcement, nobody's qualified in the law. Nobody. Nobody knows the law. But then you get somebody like me and other pro se litigants like me want to bring in the law, and the first thing you want to say, you can't bring the law in. If we can't bring the law in, then you can't use the law. Ladies and gentlemen, again, the bankruptcy is the main issue in this country. Lindbergh laid it out in 1917. The people is the credit line. We are the credit. Now, I understand where the problem comes in. If the people actually knew the truth, all we had to do was go out and sign our name. We could have a $15 million home on my signature because I don't have to pay for it because my signature signed for it. I could go out and get a Lamborghini or a Porsche or a Rolls Royce. All I have to do is sign for it. All I have to do is go down to the grocery stores and sign my name. I don't ever have to work a day in my life. I said, that's where the problem's coming in. We do have to work because that's what Lindbergh was sitting here addressing. We have to maintain our side of the fence. The problem of it is the court system has found out how to abuse us and steal our account. We have hard case evidence on this foreclosure case that I'm working with. The system took $100 million out of his birth certificate account. Because we checked it once, it was $1.3 billion. We went back a year later, it come down to a little less than $1.2 billion. They took out close to $100 million out of this man's birth certificate account. Now, they're still wanting his property. The problem of it is, he borrowed roughly $1 million and they took out $100 million. That's 90 times more. And they still want. What are we going to do about this? This is why we're here addressing you. We're here to expose this to you. As legislators, you have the obligation to clear the debt off this country. But before you do that, you've got to go back in and put a stop to the state of emergency clause in this country. You have to come back in and cancel that state of emergency. Because as long as we're running under it, people like Obama and Bush can run dictatorship, and there ain't a thing you can do about it because you allowed them. Roosevelt allowed them. When he relinquished this, Congress relinquished the power to Roosevelt, he gave them absolute authority to run a complete dictatorship in this country. Legislation no longer exists. Why are we putting you in office? Why are we wasting our time and paying you people for doing nothing? That's exactly what this boils down to. You will be required to relinquish the state of emergency clause. You will be required to sit down and forgive all debts. You bailed out these banks. And what has Obama said here and said? What has Bush said here and said? It is the future generations' money that we are borrowing. What did I say? Future generation money that you're borrowing? You're borrowing off my great-great-grandkids? That means, that proves the bankruptcy. Because the point being of it is this. Let me point something out to you people in Congress. What are you doing with the gold that's coming out of Oregon? What are you doing with the oil resources that's coming out of this country? What are you doing with the salt resources that's coming out of this country? What are you doing with the coal resources? Isn't this supposed to be paying off the public debt? Why is nothing being paid on the public debt? Why? Because the court system is embezzling. The lawyers are embezzling. The banks are embezzling. When we sign that piece of paper, when we sign that promissory note was supposed to go to the United States Treasury Department. It was supposed to go to that window, and it was supposed to zero out that debt. And you're not doing it. You're allowing the system to do inside trading. You're allowing them to sit here and embezzle while you're handing over the natural resources of this country to China, to Japan, to Germany, to England. You're handing stuff over to Russia. Why isn't any of this clearing off our public debt? You're allowing this. This isn't me saying it. These all comes out of congressional records that you people are so well at making sure that everything is transcribed just right because you want to keep a recording of what your comments are. This is where we're pulling our information, out of your Library of Congress. That's how we're pulling this information. This is where the problem lies. Nobody is addressing you. Why? Because we can't get past your staff. Why? Because they're lawyers. You know what we brought up about the lawyers? Are you aware in 1953 that you people had a hearing on the National Lawyers Guild? And you know what you people found the National Lawyers Guild to be? You found it to be a communistic party. Communist. And what have we been fighting all these years? Communists. And we got communists running our country. Whatever happened to the three branches of government? Separation of powers between legislation and judicial and executive. And we got lawyers sitting up here in Congress. We got lawyers sitting in the judicial. We got a lawyer sitting in the executive. Where is the separation of powers? And now you're telling me that we turn around and find out you guys are communist? You guys are communists. That's what we come up with. This goes back into McCarthyism in the 1950s. If you don't think like me, you don't talk like me, you don't share my opinion, you are a communist. What did Bush say before he got out of office about Al-Qaeda? If you don't think like me, you don't talk like me, you don't share my opinion, you're one of them Al-Qaeda people? He's the terrorist. Learn from our history. That's what I teach on AIB radio. This is what the research team I have. We are digging up the history. We're getting into the archives. This is what's upsetting the courts more than anything in the world. We're coming before the courts. We're proving absolute corruption. I've got attorneys that's coming to me. And they're laughing at my paperwork for the simple reason they sit here and said, you are not allowing that judge any way out. I've had FBI talk to me. I've had federal marshals talk to me. And they're sitting back and telling me, you're absolutely right. When we went to the FBI and they did a background check and they did the paperwork, their comment was, we have so much corruption on our side, we don't know who to go to. Your side, not ours, your side. I talked to Bob Ney back in 2002 before he got, 2002, 2003. We talked to his aides. They sent people in from Washington, D.C. to talk to my brother and I. We had a stack of paperwork about 3 foot tall, and that was our short stack. We had other stacks about 7, 8 foot tall. We brought in a short stack. We sat down with these aides for 5 hours. 5 hours. We sat down with these aides for 5 hours. As we went through the paperwork, their comment was, my God, you two guys are sitting on so much corruption. And the other guy says, yes, they got enough corruption against the state that they can shut this entire state down. The other guy says, no, they got enough corruption against the government to shut down this entire government. They've never seen two guys pull so much corruption. And that was back in 2002, 2003. And I have gotten more efficient at it here in 2012. We've had FBI that we've talked to, told us the same thing. The corruption is on your side of the fence. It isn't on our side. You're trying to come back and say, you people are claiming that you're sovereign. You're sovereign. It has nothing to do with people being sovereign. It's the fact that your system is abusing the bankruptcy. Your system is stealing the signatures off of our young kids and off of the elderly. And you're stealing our income out of our birth certificate account because we've already did a check. On the back of that Social Security card, you get a routing number. That routing number goes to a Federal Reserve Bank, one of the 12 depositories. That Social Security number is your account number. We know these accounts exist because we've been able to prove it. The forensic auditors are telling how much money is coming out of these accounts. Why is this country in debt? Why is nothing being paid? Why are you allowing this? And you wonder why the people are hostile? You wonder why the people are upset? Because we're starting to wake up to the lies. We're starting to wake up to the fraud. You as legislation, you created this stuff. You as legislation have the ability to fix the problem. All you have to do is take control of this country and put it back into the people's hands. Take it out of the president's hands. Because even the president isn't following the rules and regulations, because I'm going to bring up your Senate manual, which is very similar to the Jefferson's manual. The president of the United States can't go to the bathroom and use toilet paper unless the Senate tells him which one to use. If they hand him a corn cob, he has to use a corn cob. These are your rules and regulations. That's in your Senate book. I didn't write this, you people did. Why is this president sitting here dictating and making policies when the Senate doesn't even approve it? And your rule says he has to. The Jefferson's manual sits here and says, I'm going to explain something else to you. The Senate manual sits here and says, when you put a law before this country, it has to be read 3 times on the floor of Congress. Read. Not, Madam President, I waive. You will read it 3 times, 1 page or 3,000 pages. These are in your rule books. You're not reading them, you're passing them. The president has 10 days, yea, nay, or sustain. The Senate has to pass it and read it 3 different times. You're not doing any of this. Why? Because it goes back into the District of Columbia. It don't matter what you guys do. It can never apply to us. And you're trying to force these laws onto us. We have the evidence, like I said here and said, Title 18 is not legitimate. We have the congressional records where the Library of Congress went back in and validated. Only the House put it up. The Senate rejected it 3 different times. It is nothing more than prima facie law. And you're trying to shove this down the people's throat, and these lawyers know this, and the judges know this, and when we try to bring it up, you want to sit here and you want to hee haw haw and railroad the people, because who do we have for accountability? Because we can't be sued because we're judges, we're above the law. When does a crime become so high that it's no longer a crime? At what point do we do accountability on judges violating rights on these people? Because every one of these court cases, every single court case has never had a victim. Never had a victim. Because it's always the state that's claiming injury. How is the state injured? Because I didn't have a turn signal on when I turned left, if nobody was involved in an accident. How was the state involved and got injured when I had a license plate light out? How is the state injured? Well, you broke a regulation. That regulation don't apply to me, because I'm going to remind you, if that is the case, then why didn't the state, if the license plate light was out, why didn't the police just take it down to the local maintenance and have the state fix it, or take it down to the county? Because you own it. The people don't. That goes under your bankruptcy side of this thing. All this that we're dealing with, ladies and gentlemen, falls with bankruptcy. It's being abused by the courts, it's being abused by the lawyers, it's being abused by the banks. And you're keeping people ignorant of this, and when we start bringing it up, the judge tells you we're not going to go there, we're going to suppress the evidence, we're going to put liens against you, we're going to put gag orders against you. That is due process violation. That sits here and violates what is known as an affirmative action on our side for an affirmative defense. You're not allowing an affirmative defense to come into these courts. You're not allowing people to bring in the evidence and the witnesses. Because it used to be the people versus so-and-so, okay? Let me bring some witnesses on my side and see if these people were injured. It's no longer the people, because I got people on my side that was never injured. Whatever happened to the real victim? If you've got a rape victim, why don't you bring the rape victim in and have the state represent so-and-so? Not the state being the plaintiff, but the state representing so-and-so. This is where the problem's coming in. Everything's based on fraud. Everything's based on lies. Everything is based on your signature. Because when you go into that courtroom, here, sign this. When you're signing it, you didn't realize they're going to sell your signature on the stock market because you just gave them permission to sell your name. That court has now become tainted. That court is now in violation of your own regulations under Title 28, 455. That court has a vested interest. Because the moment you sign it, that was stock market time, because we can prove that every court case has a QSIP number. Every QSIP number goes right into the CRIS account, which is a court registry investment system. We can sit back and show that you are running multiple cases with the same numbers and multiple times selling them on the stock market. We have the proof of all of this. You want to stop the corruption in the court? Start going back and doing accountability on these judges. Start allowing the people to start bringing charges. Get rid of the bar association in this country. Shut the bar down. That bar is where the problem is. That bar is a violation of the Smith Act. That bar is in violation of the Taft-Hartley Act. That bar association is in violation of due process, because the people cannot be heard, because the lawyers will not bring nothing up before the judge without being threatened. And you're going to have to hire a lawyer for $40,000 or $50,000, and the judge and the lawyer tells you that, look, the judge told me I can't bring this up because I would lose my bar card, so we're going to plea bargain you out for something you really didn't do and consider yourself lucky? I don't consider myself lucky when I'm being railroaded. Not when this man's being paid up front to sit down and represent me, and he can't represent me because he's got his hands tied and he's being threatened for disbarment. That's not considered myself lucky. That's why you created the private attorney general. That's why we are out here. And I realize a lot of us aren't educated in the manner that I am in. And I'm not sitting here saying that I have a better education. I just have a better understanding of it. I realize part of the problem is people are wanting to bring in all the Patriot stuff. But let me tell you some of the background on the Patriot stuff. People brought in that a person is a corporation. You're absolutely right. A person is a corporation. And I can sit here and prove it. Because if you get into the Delaware Trust, what is known as the Act of Corporate Law, created in Delaware, the Wilmington Trust Company, Delaware Trust Company, and the Corporate Trust Company of America created a private bill, and I know you ladies and gentlemen know what a private bill is. They went in and created a person to be a corporation, but not to be a natural person, not to be construed, so you have a separation. It's a well-established fact in Delaware law under Title 8, which is corporations, Chapter 6, Section 617. A corporation has to have a last name. My last name is Class, so you've already made me a corporation because I have a last name. So you drug me as a corporation under corporate law. Texas Administrative Code 79, Chapter 79, under 79.31, all entities have to be capitalized. That capitalization is a corporation. So everything that comes into this court is all capitalized. It's all corporation. You're dragging us in under corporate law and you're not telling us that. But when we try to bring it up, what's the court do? They sit here and laugh, but yet there's the laws. They want to deny the very law that is written because they don't want to deal with it, because they know they cannot deal with a living, breathing human being. They don't have that authority. It has to be a civil action of one of us against one another, or you have to bring the state in representing the victim. And you're not bringing the state in as a representation, you're bringing the state in as the actual victim. And that's fraud. And that's embezzlement. Why? Because every time you get somebody thrown into jail, how much federal funding do you give the county jails for support? How much federal funding do you dump into the federal prisons? How much federal funding do you dump into the state prisons? Now, let's go back and talk about the labor camps in these prisons. That these people are turning out auto parts. Worldwide auto parts is the big one. They have prisoners that sit here making generators, brakes, and everything else under worldwide auto parts. These are prisoners that was bought off. How do I know that? Because we have the congressional records that shows that this company went in and paid over $1 million to these prisons to have these prisoners work at cut rate prices and charge top prices for car parts. And your regulation says they had to be paid union scale. And that money had to go back home to their families. Is their families getting any of this money? No. Why? Because you're not pushing the issue, because you don't want to hear the issues. You're suppressing it. The courts are suppressing it. The lawyers are suppressing it. Again, I'm coming before you. What are you guys going to do about this? We're handing, and I said, I have not even begun to start on this yet. I have got a whole history behind me of records that come from your offices, came out of the Library of Congress, that you people created, your rules, your licenses. And you know what the best part of it is? It's the Bar Association that wrote all this up. And why are they ignorant of their own laws? How can you possibly come back in and nail people of being ignorant whenever your own association wrote it up? Because I'm going to remind you of Senate Bill 7, the Administrative Procedure Act of 1946. It was the Bar Association that thought it was a wonderful idea to have administrative courts. It was the Bar Association that had administrative officers so people like us could address it and deal with this administratively to fix the problem. Why are we being denied access to administrative courts? Why are we being told, well, there's no such thing as administrative court? Why are we being told when we go bring a lawsuit, you fail to exhaust your administrative remedies? If we have administrative remedies, then it had to be administrative court, and we had to have an administrative hearing, and we're being denied administrative hearings. Because in any administrative court, John Q. Public, me, I have to be the plaintiff in that courtroom. I can never be a defendant under your own rules and regulations, because we are not part of the system. Now, you dragging us in under that state of emergency clause again because of our birth certificate, because you're claiming ownership under the name? Is that how you're dragging us in? Well, if we're going to be employees of the state, we're going to be employees of the federal government. I haven't been paid. I'm going to tell you right now, we got a labor management dispute. Now, are we going to sit here and address the labor management dispute? Because I think we need to. I think we need to address this. Because if we're going to be under the state of emergency, and you're going to have ownership, and you're going to own my vehicle, and you're going to own my home, under that state of emergency clause, you got to do all the upkeep on my property. You got to sit down and do all the maintenance. You got to pay the insurance. And because I'm house sitting, I need a wage. So you got to pay me. Same thing with automobiles. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been through all this. I talked about this earlier. That state of emergency is the biggest clause that we have and the biggest problem we have in this country. That is where so much of our problems stem from, and your court system knows it. And they won't allow it because the moment you bring into the court the state of emergency, we are not going to go there. We're not going to allow you to do this. I says, and why is it when you deal with IRS, which is another issue, why is it that IRS, you can never pay them in Federal Reserve notes? Why can't you pay IRS with Federal Reserve notes? Why do they refuse it? Their excuse is, well, we can't trust our people. Oh, you can't trust your people to sit here and take Federal Reserve notes, but they're supposed to be honest when they're sitting here writing me up on paperwork for violations? I said, you know as well as I do, that IRS agent knows the laws. He is aware that he's supposed to discharge the debt. There's no such thing as charging taxes on Federal Reserve notes because the Federal Reserve note, again, I will remind you, the Lindbergh of 1917 is the credit of the people. I will remind you of McFadden. That Federal Reserve note is a mere promise to pay. How is IRS collecting taxes on a promise to pay on a Federal Reserve note? They already have your signature. That IRS agent, all he has to do is take your signature down, go down to the United States Treasury, which is written in the Federal Reserve Act 1913, Section 16, under Title 12, 411. Take that instrument down to the Treasury, turn it into the window, zero out the debt. You don't have to collect taxes because it's already been zeroed out. What they're doing, again, they're taking your signature and they're putting it on the stock market. They're securitizing. Is IRS paying the taxes? No. Who is sitting here failing to do their job? The American people or the system? Who is failing to sit here and see that the public debt is paid? The American people or your side of the fence? IRS has the duty to sit here when they get a signature to take it down to the Treasury window under your own rules and regulations that you people created. They're required to take that signature down, take it to the Treasury, put it in, and have that debt canceled. And they're not doing it. The court, and when they're sitting here and they're taking your signature, if they're going to sit here and securitize off of your signature, they cannot throw you in jail while they have securitized off your signature, because that's now double jeopardy. You're now being collected twice on one crime. They're taking your signature and selling it, and they're making you go to jail. They're entitled to one or the other. That's the same thing with these mortgages. When they securitize, that property belongs to you. Because the courts are hiding this in bankruptcy, because these bankruptcy courts, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to tell you right now, these bankruptcy court does not deal with the bankruptcy of the American people. That bankruptcy court is supposed to be dealing with the bankruptcy of the United States. That bankruptcy court, when we are coming in, is that judge is supposed to be telling the banker, says, excuse me, did you make money off this man's signature? Oh, you did. Did you pay the public debt? Oh, you didn't. That banker is supposed to be going to jail, not have John Q. Public's home taken off of them. That bankruptcy court function is to make sure that the debt is paid for the United States. That is their function, and that is not how they're doing it. They're coming in and taking the people's homes. They're allowing the bankers to steal the property, sell it to somebody else, and turn around and do the whole process all over again. God only made so much land, and they know it. For every time they steal signature, they are securitizing. They're making more and more and more and more. And the bottom line boils down to that bankruptcy bank, that court system, is supposed to be keeping the bankers honest. It's supposed to be discharging the debt and naming the people and giving them their property because the bankers did not do their job. That's where the issue is. That's where the problem lies. It all falls back under that state of emergency. You want to solve the problem, cancel the state of emergency, start using the gold in this country, start using the oil in this country, start using the coal in this country as the resource for securitizing and fixing the problem. Quit using the people as slave labor and quit using our signatures and then not paying off the debt and embezzling the natural resources out of this country. That's how you want to fix the problem. I want to thank you.
Just wondering what the difference between high and low Zoom speed was. So.
Okay, so you're sorry. All right, can you?
Yes, it's recording.
All right. Talk about what we got to do with the Bar Association.
Okay. Congress created the PAG. They gave the people the power. There was no legislative law that you people ever created or any state legislation has ever created that allowed a bar association to ever come in existence in this country. We have to get rid of the bar. We have to shut it down. If you're going to do the bar association, then put them under a license to the Secretary of State like a doctor and not under the control of the judge. This way we can have honest lawyers coming into here. At this point, we have anarchy in the system. We have absolutely total chaos within the system because nobody represents the people and they don't allow people like me to come in as a PAG to bring forth the congressional records because the judges don't want to hear it. Why? Because under the state of emergency. We have to get rid of the Bar Association. We don't have a choice.